All down. All silent. Going. Go. So congratulations.
Welcome to the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate. Each episode, we chat with real estate author and industry leader Peter O'Malley to discuss the current property market conditions and provide insights to assist you on your property journey.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Current Market Insights. I'm your host, Kieran O'Brien, and with me is Mr. Peter O'Malley.
G'day, Kieran. Great to see you.
Great to see you, buddy. I want to talk today about what I think is a really interesting topic. We on the podcast here often talk about markets, we talk about sentiment, we talk about economies, we talk about a bunch of things that sometimes we don't really have much scope to talk about. But one topic that we've pretty consistently worked on over the last couple of years has been real estate agent behaviours, particularly underquoting, and we've gone through, I feel like, a whole adventure on this topic. You know, we started with some anecdotes, and we started with some insights, and we've started with some real cases in the media. And we've talked about, more recently, some of the changes the government have made or are attempting to make to curb these kinds of behaviours. Now, one of those is the register. You know, for agents that are misbehaving, they can get reported. I mentioned to you recently that Fair Trading had called me about a case where I'd reported a dodgy campaign, and, you know, incidentally, as a follow-up, they called me and spoke to me again and said they were going to do something with the agency involved. So that's been an interesting development, and there's certainly been a lot more activity from this government and even the previous government to a certain degree around tackling some of these issues. Now, in a big turn of events, I think, since we last really spoke about this, the New South Wales government has tabled some legislation aimed at really knocking this behaviour on the head. So what I want to talk about today is that legislation, what it really does mean for the average person engaging in real estate, but particularly what it means for sellers in the market, and what you think, in your experience, it will do to the behaviours of real estate agents out there.
Oh, thanks, Kieran. Look, I think the big one, first and foremost, is the increase in penalties. So reading from the Fair Trading Minister's statement to the Parliament, he says that the penalty for an agent inducing someone into a contract through a misleading bidding or colluding at auctions will increase from $55,000 to $110,000. The corporation penalty for mishandling trust monies will increase from $11,000 to $110,000. So there's serious penalties here. They've effectively tripled the penalties for real estate agents that engage in improper conduct, and in some cases they will charge 3 times the agent's commission, or $110,000, whichever is greater, for those agents that don't meet their obligations in relation to the estimated selling price in the agreement and go on to underquote.
That's pretty huge. I remember when we first started talking about this topic, one of the things that you said, which was quite poignant and has stuck with me ever since that conversation, was that many agencies knowingly just engage in this behaviour and adopt these behaviours knowing that the fine is just the cost of doing business to them. They make so much money on some of these agreements that they think, well, it doesn't matter. You know, $5,000 or whatever it might be, that's just, you know, I just lose 10% and I move on, you know. But this really does put the nail there that you can do that, but we'll hammer you and make it not worth your while. Oh,
that's right. Just this week, I was talking with a buyer's agent who was referencing another agent in the marketplace's listing, and it had an advertised guide on it of 2.6.
Yep.
And I said to the buyer's agent, "What do you think this one will sell for?" And she said, "Oh, I know they want 3.1 for that."
Yeah, right.
And I just laughed because she'd been down there and had the word with the agent, and the agent's just shamelessly told her that, yeah, we're quoting 2.6, but we really want 3.1. That's just everyday. That's just everyday behaviour in 2026 for real estate agents, which is why this bill has come to pass.
So, do you think in that scenario, do you think that that's arrogance from the agent or just ignorance that, you know, we're now entering a period where they could they could lose their career over something like this?
Well, it's such a hot button issue right across Sydney, and particularly within the real estate industry itself, that you can't call it ignorance.
Oh, well, like I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, right?
But
That maybe
I,
they're just
I know that you've posed that, but you just can't call that ignorance.
Yeah.
That is just complete arrogance.
Has to be. And just assuming that they're either above the law or
They'll never get caught.
they'll never get caught. But I mean, as we've heard, I mean, there is now the register. People can publicly name and shame to a certain degree with investigation. They can, or
that's a prosecution. If you're prosecuted, you can be named or shamed. So I don't want to see trial by media or people's emotions spilling into a register of, I missed out at an auction, so Kieran O'Brien's a bad guy. If the agent is prosecuted and found guilty and charged and penalised and all of that, yes, they go on the name and shame register, yeah.
which is reasonable. So, look, moving back to the proposed bill, we have said that, and you've kind of, I guess, in some ways prophesied that the government was going to become more and more aggressive, and you'd heard through reliable sources that there was activity going on in the background from places like Fair Trading doing investigations and really digging much further than we thought or the public thought there might be. What do you think is the kind of crux of this bill in terms of obligations for agents? So obviously there's larger fines now.
That's the first one, larger fines.
Yeah.
The second one is the agent must provide a statement of information and have that on display and available for the consumer. And that's essentially, we've got to learn more about this, but it's essentially advising the consumer how they arrived at the price guide that they did.
Okay, so it's something of a market appraisal summary with recent sales and estimates of all the pros and cons of the property with a price publicly listed. Is that part of the statement?
Well, three comparable sales, and it hasn't been released yet, or I haven't seen it anyway, of what this statement of information looks like. But there's more paperwork for real estate agents, and as governments do when they're trying to clean a rogue industry up, they just set traps.
Yeah.
They just keep asking for information and keep tightening the screws and driving the perpetrators into a corner. So when there is a complaint, they've got very, very clear rail tracks, if you like, that they can run down on how to get a successful prosecution. So the New South Wales state government are lining real estate agents up here.
Yeah.
Make no mistake. And your agent who's flippantly and arrogantly saying 2.6 on a listing where they know the client wants 3.1, that's the sort of agent that will get caught out.
You mention often that with underquoting, many of the sellers are complicit in the process. Do you think that this statement of information in some ways will lessen the not the ability but perhaps the appetite of sellers to commit to that same kind of false pricing? Because if it has to go out there on a public document, my instinct tells me that sellers are not going to be so willing to publicly undersell.
The state government are still not targeting vendors in any of this.
Right.
This statement of information is on the agent's head. It's got nothing to do with the vendor.
Right.
So how the real estate agent position themselves to the market and the documents that they provide is all related around the agent's conduct, and it's the agent's corporation and the agent's license that's at risk.
So what do you think will happen? Let's paint a realistic scenario. Let's say you're 2.6 to 3.1 house, and there's a statement of information from the agent that says 2.6 because that's what they're publicly advertising. So their statement has to match. But the owner still wants 3.1. Well, I mean, what's going to happen in that kind of campaign where the legal document, in inverted commas, that outlines the frame of the campaign says 2.6 is the mark, and here's all the references we used?
Oh, look, we'll talk about the digital footprint in a moment because I think that's back in vogue and very relevant here. What the state government are doing is trying to lock on every campaign, lock the real estate agents into a position. And it's a position that they can track back on in time to say how and why.
Yeah.
So one of the things, there's triggers here. And one of the triggers, as it should be, by the way, is when an auction passes in for more than 10% above the agent's price guide.
Yeah.
That's a trigger.
Yeah, which we talked about.
The Department of Fair Trade want to know, You said to the marketplace for 4 weeks the auction guide was 2.6, and then you passed it in for 2,950,000 on the Saturday and put it on the market on the Monday morning for 3.1.
Yeah.
What happened here? Explain yourself.
Yeah. And they've got nowhere to go because they've got their statement that says, well, this is what we quoted it.
Correct. And,
Yeah.
and prior to this bill being introduced, there was no requirement for a statement. So the agent's just saying the vendor blindsided me on Friday night with a high reserve.
Yeah.
They didn't really, but if you're a prosecutor, how do you prosecute that case?
Yeah.
But the statement of information, you've left it there for 4 weeks. So we'll see what's in the statement of information. But that's a new piece of legislation that the industry will have to adhere to. Agents will grumble about the additional compliance and paperwork, and it's the people that have profited over the last 5 to 10 years through this sales tactic that have caused it on the entire industry.
I'm going to ask you to speculate a little before we move on from the statement itself. But given that these statements exist in a somewhat similar fashion by the sounds of it in Victoria to date, and when you ask for property information down there, the agents will send you I can't remember, it's VCAT or something, has a document that you get that has a summary of all the information on the property. One of the things they have to do down there is put an auction reserve price. Now, this would be speculation on your part, but do you think that the government, in some ways, with this proposed statement, are laying the path to try and make similar changes to help protect the auction underquoting kind of space as well?
What do you mean protect it?
Well, so you just mentioned, for example, an agent might say, "Oh, look, I got blindsided with the reserve price on the eve of the auction." Whereas in Victoria, I think they're required to publish the price 7 days before the auction as part of this statement. Do you think that the government is kind of creating a bit of a template for them to be able to do something similar here?
Look, they haven't ruled it out, so they're giving them scope to do so. So if you go back to COVID, for example, and I think it was the return to school measure, Dominic Perrottet, Liberal Premier in New South Wales, Dominic Perrottet, and Daniel Andrews, your mate in Victoria,
Never met the
Labor
guy.
Party,
Never met the guy.
had very similar policies around the return to school.
Yep.
So there was clearly cross-sharing of information. And that was just, for me, that was, following how governments of different persuasion interact with each other. That was just interesting to see that they were so closely aligned in the policies they were coming up with at that time. Now, obviously, you have at the moment State Victoria Labor and State New South Wales Labor. There's elements of the Victorian model in what has been proposed here in New South Wales, but they haven't gone as far as what you've just said, which is publishing the reserve. But if this bill is implemented and does not clean up underquoting, well, clearly that's the next step.
Yeah.
And the real estate industry have not got the message. Stop doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, and it as you kind of highlighted, and the reason I kind of asked is the industry can stop this getting harder for agents to do their job by just people doing the right thing. It's not a complex situation, right? I mean, this legislation is complex because that's all legislation is. But the reality is, all agents need to do is just be honest and forthcoming with information. And
so, those that are listening and confused and haven't heard us say this before, why do real estate agents underquote, Kieran?
I'm going to say I don't know because you love answering this one.
Because it works.
Exactly.
Underquoting attracts in competition, and then the agent just stands back and says, well, whoever wins the bidding gets the house.
Yeah.
That's why they do it, because it delivers hopeful bidders to them on an otherwise stale property, and then they can say to the vendor, even if it stops below the vendor's price, here's an active bidder, unconditional today at auction. This is the best bidder of the 300 people that inquired on your home during the campaign. I suggest you grab it while it's going.
Yeah. Moving on from the statement there, because obviously there's still a lot up in the air about it. I personally feel like it's going to become a vessel to make things a little bit harder. But moving through, you mentioned the digital footprint, which is something we have talked about previously. And for our listeners, it references the idea that when you market your property, what you put out there stays out there. Especially in the internet age, it's very difficult to get rid of information. I think we showed people or talked about the example previously of using apps like Domain and realestate.com. If you favourite a property, you can see the history of pricing on that property, even when it's changed, because it does stay there. It gives you notifications. So given you're referencing the digital footprint again, what is happening with the legislation that you think is likely to make the digital footprint so much more important again?
Okay, real estate agents must provide a price on every listing.
Do they not do that now?
No. And I must qualify that Harris Partners would only put a price on 50% of our listings and will be compelled, as every agent will be, to have a price on every listing. So what the state government are doing here, if you talk about the railway tracks that the state government are laying for themselves to be able to successfully prosecute agents that underquote, is they want the agents on the record.
Yeah.
And they want to be able to track back with the agent's digital footprint of a campaign.
Yep.
Where a lot of agents will have no advertised price guide and will underquote, but will underquote verbally.
Yep.
And then it's much harder for the state government to see where the underquoting indiscretion has occurred because everything was done verbally, whereas it's like, show me the advertised history for this property. Clearly the initial price guide was too low. You didn't adjust it. You shouldn't have started so low. I've got a tangible track record of your behaviour.
So will this change, and I assume it will, but some properties, particularly high end, you see things like price on arrival, price on inquiry, etc. Will this legislation change that? So they must say, it's
if you want 50 mil,
yeah.
you put 50 mil on it. That's captured by this, yeah.
And does it change the ability?
That's really damaging for those properties, by the way, if it's worth 32.
100%. Yeah.
And again, as I just said, Harris Partners for 20 years has in certain instances taken market feedback and not provided an advertised price until we've got some market feedback. That strategy's out the window here.
Yeah.
And that was an effective strategy for protecting your vendor's position. But the industry has driven the state government to a point where the state government want to see every agent on the record as to what they're quoting.
Does that, a couple of questions I have from this then, to your knowledge, does that mean that agents will agencies still be able to provide a price guide in a range?
Yes, to a maximum of 10% range.
Okay, so they're not going to impact the ability to do that.
The price guide or the range they provide has to match the range that's on their agency agreement.
And the statement, I would assume.
And the statement of information. And if they reduce the price from the agency agreement, they need to state why.
Okay. To me, that all sounds quite positive. The other question I have then about the pricing being public, will that impact those sellers or buyers, whichever side it might be, that don't want their sale published? For whatever reason, privacy, conflicts, whatever it could be, will that impact if there is then a footprint of what the pricing was throughout the campaign and ultimately guidance on where it may have ended up? Is that going to impact that ability for people to maintain that privacy?
Of what it's sold for?
Yeah.
In New South Wales, there's no reason that an agent is compelled to disclose the sale price that I know of.
Yet.
But in Victoria, there is.
Okay.
That is coming for Victoria, where one of their ways of cleaning up underquoting is a vendor and a real estate agent must disclose the sale price on all sales. I don't mind that one because I think the market at large wants to know where things are at, and we are asked regularly to not disclose a sale price by a buyer or a seller. It does become public information on the day of settlement.
Yeah.
But I think having good real estate data does make for a cleaner operating market. That does come to the detriment of people's privacy, which I acknowledge.
And it certainly does make, as I assume the reason they're doing it in Victoria, it allows buyers, we always say people should do their own research before they go and purchase a property, before they think about selling. They should really look at all available info. And in some markets, the areas that you work, the eastern suburbs in Sydney, there are spaces where getting accurate data is hard because people want to maintain their privacy for whatever reason, and you can look up whole streets and it's almost impossible to get a price. But if it's mandated, then at least, people can come to market looking with interest, knowing, hey, at least, and acknowledging that conditions change, but at least saying, well, 2 years ago, it got 5 million. So my expectation would be it's not going to be less than 5 million at the moment without some significant market forces.
Indeed. And look, you've just outlined there how disclosing prices helps buyers not be victim of underquoting, which is fine, a transparent market. There's another reason that's got nothing to do with underquoting, which is why I think disclosing sale prices is fair. And that is those regional locations that appeal to Sydney-siders and Melbourneites and city slickers that are heading to desirable locations to buy, maybe to retire or to buy a second residence, a lifestyle residence. And they're the newbie in town, and the real estate agents see them coming and just make prices up as to what things sell for.
Yeah.
And the two towns I always tell people to be very careful in is Bowral and Byron Bay.
I was just about to say Bowral because I was only talking to someone about this yesterday.
Yeah.
You get suckered in down there.
And in Sydney, how I've explained this to people over the years is in Sydney, if a property's worth $1 million, you'll find that it's priced somewhere between 900 and 1.1, depending on the agent's strategy. Yeah. In Bowral, if you've got a property that's worth $1 million, someone will put it on the market for 1.6.
Yeah.
And then point down the road loosely and say that one down the road sold for 1,450, and this is superior.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how do I check the one down the road sold for 1,450? Say, I don't know, but this is what we want.
You've got to go down the Imperial and ask the local agent when he's having his 5 p.m. schooner.
That's right, and we don't want to cast any aspersions on the good real estate agents of Bowral, but they are two lifestyle markets in my time in real estate where it's like I watch how those markets perform, and it's like these people are looking for a Sydney sucker.
Well, we did an episode on this, if you remember. We talked about, particularly post-pandemic, where there were markets that had been 30, 40% growth and people were getting suckered in, not having a local agent on the ground, not having a buyer's agent, not having anyone they trusted, and getting pulled into properties buying, thinking, great, we're in town, what a bargain, then realising, talk to the neighbours and they bought for 50% less 3 months earlier, because they come from town.
That's right. So that is a positive adjunct of these underquoting laws that will help home buyers that are heading to buy in markets, or investors that are heading to buy in markets where the real estate agents don't disclose any sale prices and they're the gatekeepers of information.
Yeah. As we move toward the end of today's topic then, Peter, is there anything that's, prospective sellers, we often talk about them as being complicit in a lot of the underquoting, but is there anything that prospective sellers can do or should be asking their agent in particular, or their potential agent, with the background that these changes are likely coming? Is there should they be asking for samples of the statement of information, for example, early, as part of a campaign kind of setup? Is this something that you might have samples from an agent when you're interviewing agents to see if you can sell? I mean, is it going to change how vendors interact with their agent, I guess, is what I'm getting at here, before they choose?
Look, no. I've read through the bill, not in great detail, but I haven't seen anything here that will have a great role on vendors.
Yep.
Yeah. Just a line that we mentioned in a previous podcast where a new way of underquoting is a real estate agent said to a buyer, the current interest is at 1.6.
Yeah.
That property, by the way, went on to sell for 1.825 or 1.835. But to lure the next buyer in without underquoting or advertising too low, they said, "What do you think it'll sell for at the auction?" And they've probably taken an opportunistic bargain hunter's offer and said, "Well, look, we have had someone give us an offer of 1.6," and the buyers go, "Oh, maybe 1.625 will buy this." In the bill, which is pretty exhaustive, there's a line that covers that. A real estate agent or a person engaged by a real estate agent must not, when marketing a residential property, make a statement to another person that indicates or suggests the property may be sold for a price that is less than the estimated selling price.
Interesting. Okay.
So this is pretty exhaustive, this bill. Now, again, not every agent's going to get caught out for some of those scenarios that I've just outlined, but this bill is giving the state government and the Department of Fair Trade in New South Wales vastly increased ability and powers to prosecute agents that are behaving that way.
Final question for you then. Do you think it's a good step or a bad step for the industry at large?
Oh, look, we can't carry on the way we are. So years ago, I saw a stat, which I won't try and get to the specifics of it, but basically in America, the reason they're not as enthusiastic about their real estate market as Australia is because America is sort of over-invested in the stock market. So that's why you'll often hear Americans talking about your 401k.
Yeah.
Now, the reverse is the case here in Australia, where obviously there's a lot of people that are invested in the share market, but nowhere near to the degree per capita as what they are in America. But we're over-invested in our property market here in Australia when compared with America.
Yeah.
So what a 401k is to an American, house prices are to an Australian.
Yeah.
And you have Australia's two largest markets, Sydney and Melbourne, that are operating in a Wild West manner of doing business, which just can't be sustained.
It's the NDIS of sales, Peter.
Yeah, well, we don't want to broaden the discussion. We're winding up, aren't we? So this is good. I don't like all of it, but I have come to accept that this is where we are because of where the real estate industry has driven the regulator to.
Final question then before we wrap up. As a principal of an agency, from what you read in here, is it likely to have a significant enough administrative or bureaucratic burden that you or agents more broadly would need to potentially increase their prices?
Okay. Increase prices, yeah and no. Let me broaden the discussion, even though you said you were going to wind it down. And this is maybe a topic for another date. People who don't really follow the real estate industry as closely as us may know that the number of real estate agencies in every suburban township is reducing.
Yeah.
If they're really watching, they'll equally notice that the size of each real estate agency is larger than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And real estate agents in July are about to be hit with the AML, the anti-money laundering legislation that's coming into effect, which is going to push up compliance and paperwork. This underquoting here is more, the new statement of information is more compliance and paperwork. And there's many other areas, the property management, compliance and paperwork.
Data security, I mean, you got online presence, privacy, like
it just doesn't
more
stop.
than ever, right?
So what is happening, wrongly or rightly, is the small ma and pa businesses are getting crushed.
Yeah.
And your local suburban real estate agency is turning into a mini corporation.
Yep. So you lose the soul, you lose the personality in many cases.
Well, it's just defined as it is morphing from a cottage industry into essentially, a suburban corporation.
Which is a shame. I think, if I'm someone who wants to deal with a business in any capacity, I like the ability to choose small and personalised and approachable, and there's so many elements that are great about that. I don't know about our listeners, but I don't think I'm a huge fan of corporatising every industry and losing that essence of what makes, a small business, a small town business a good thing.
No, I'm certainly not a fan of it, but that is the reality of where all of this compliance has driven the real estate industry.
Yeah, it's almost by design, Peter. Look, as always, really interesting topic today. I think this space is going to be something we will continue to talk about substantially over the rest of this year, as I think this government, for rightly or wrongly, is pretty heavily invested in property, broadly speaking. And I think we're going to have a lot more to talk about, Peter. But as always, I know our listeners value it, and I certainly appreciate speaking with you today.
Good on you. Thanks, Kieran.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks to everyone for listening to Current Market Insights. We look forward to speaking with you next time.
Thanks for joining us on the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate, the podcast providing real estate insights you won't find anywhere else.